Joining us now on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law, is the one and only Mike Spofford, who is live from 1265. Mike, you, of course, can follow at Mike Spofford and over at Packers.com. It is great to be chatting with you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Andy. How about yourself?
I am fantastic. Day one of Packers training camp. You're down in the thick of things right now. We're going to be talking to Goody in just a little under an hour. Of course, Matt in about an hour and 20 minutes, and then practice in just over 2 hours from now. What's the vibe over there for day one of training camp?
Hey, I think everybody's just ready to get this thing rolling, right? I mean, I know there's always this big build up to the first day of training camp, but then practice is really still just sort of like OTAs because they're not in pads yet and whatnot. But when you have the crowd out there at Nitschke Field, when you have all the fans, along the chain link fences and the bike rides and everything else, all the kids getting involved in the activities, it definitely creates an atmosphere unlike any other. This is the 1 month of the year from now until the end of training camp that this place feels like this, and it's a lot of fun.
It's alive. There's a vibe. There's an energy. It's a rite of passage in summer. It's an epic feeling. I can't wait to get out there and obviously see you guys all here in just a little bit. We have, of course, recently had a big transaction right before the start of training camp, similar to last year where Kenny Clark signed his extension. This year we get Zack Tom signing his extension right before the start of camp. A key piece for Green Bay, a great contract for the Packers. Your thoughts on Zack Tom signing right before the start of camp here?
Well, I'm sure both sides, both the team and the player, are really happy to get this thing done before training camp starts. I don't think anybody's surprised, of course, that the Packers are extending Zack Tom and they want him in the fold long term. Goody was pretty open and honest about that throughout the offseason, that this was a priority for the organization. And to Zack Tom's credit, he didn't talk about it in the media. He didn't try to do any kind of a holdout during the voluntary off-season workouts or mini camp or anything like that. He just went about his business, figured it would take care of itself, and it did. And I think the Packers they came out in a pretty good spot here. When you look at the fact that Zack Tom, he finished third in the Associated Press All-Pro voting at right tackle last year. Two of the highest paid right tackles in the game right now, Tristan Wirfs and Penei Sewell, they both got $80 million of guaranteed money on their new deals. Now they're longer deals, but they got $80 million of guaranteed money. And the Packers essentially were able to get Zack Tom to this long-term signed to this long-term extension for about $30 million in guaranteed money. So that's it's a good deal for Zack Tom. It's a lot of money in his pocket right away with that big signing bonus, but it's also a good deal for the Packers in terms of the overall structure.
I think from a structure standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, I think the Packers have to be thrilled with the overall structure of this contract. And like you said, it's not like Zack Tom's calling home and being like, sorry guys, I only got 88 million. I think that phone call to his family was probably pretty excited for what he got on his side as well. So hopefully this is a win-win for both sides. But looking at it from a Packers standpoint, I think getting this deal done, 4-year extension, it's going to take him through really the prime of his career through age 30. He'll be a free agent at age 31 if this contract goes through fruition to the end of it. So again, I think Green Bay and Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball have to be absolutely thrilled with how this contract came out. Not the only transaction. Again, as we're being joined by Mike Spofford, you can follow him over at Mike Spofford on social media. And of course, the wonderful work that he, Wes, and the team do over at Packers.com. That was not the only transaction. They made a couple other moves, new wide receiver, new kicker. Alex Hale is gone. They released a couple defensive tackles. And of course, we saw Quay Walker, amongst others, be put on the physically unable to perform list. Elton Jenkins on the non-football injury list. Anything stand out to you in general about these transactions or anything that, you kind of will keep an extra eye on at the start of camp here?
I don't know if there's anything too awfully surprising. I mean, it was certainly unexpected that apparently this injury happened with Alex Hale. And so they needed to move on there and bring in another kicker because they don't want their veteran and Brandon McManus to have to take all of the kicking reps throughout training camp. He's a veteran who's going to obviously get his work in, but he doesn't need to work that leg maybe like he did when he was 24, 25 years old. So that was sort of a move made out of necessity that wasn't necessarily expected. But when you bring in another wide receiver into this mix, the signing from Colorado, another guy to keep an eye on, right? I mean, the Packers have a pretty good track record at bringing in wide receivers who can make some things happen out there on the practice field. And obviously, there are only so many roster spots. There are only so many spots on the practice squad. But anybody that's out there, especially with these quarterbacks, Jordan Love, Malik Willis, those guys can certainly help make anybody make a bid for the roster. So definitely worth keeping an eye on.
I was just talking about that wide receiver spot, and even the practice squads spots are going to be interesting. There's going to be probably two of maybe McCole Hardman, Bo Melton, and Malik Heath, who may not end up making the team, who will be in the conversation for the practice squad. Then you've even got some really fun guys like Sam Brown Jr., Cornelius Johnson, Julian Hicks, and now Will Shepherd as well. That even just, again, trying to fight for a wide receiver practice squad is going to be very difficult. So when Goody and Matt talk about competition and depth, well, you've got to fight tooth and nail just to try to make it out of the Packers practice squad here at wide receiver. As you get ready for camp, Mike, we all have kind of different players, maybe, different, roster battles, different storylines that we're kind of keeping an eye on as camp kicks off. As you kind of go in and, are going to be keeping an extra eye on things, what are maybe a couple storylines, roster battles, or just players in general that you might be keeping an extra eye on?
I think for me, the biggest thing as far as a position group that I'll be watching, and I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about wide receivers, and they'll certainly get their due with as heated as that competition is going to be. But I'm going to be watching things really closely on the offensive line because, for one, there's been the contract issue with Elton Jenkins, and we're going to hear from Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur before practice. I'm sure they're going to be asked about what the status is with Jenkins. He was not participating during the offseason program, so the move to center feels like it hasn't really officially started yet, and we'll see where things are with that. So that's a big one. But then also with Jordan Morgan, your first-round draft pick from last year, we've been told he's going to be competing with Rasheed Walker at left tackle. He's going to be competing with Sean Ryan at right guard. Can Jordan Morgan win a starting spot on this offensive line as a first-round draft pick who had his rookie season cut short due to a recurring shoulder injury that eventually needed surgery? That was unfortunate in that respect, but obviously he was drafted in the first round for a reason. Now, I think Walker at left tackle and Ryan at right guard, both of those guys are going to be pretty difficult to beat out. I mean, those guys have piled up a lot of experience now over the last couple of years. They've certainly shown what they're worth with this Packers offense and with the offensive line unit. So it's not going to be easy for Jordan Morgan to crack this starting lineup, but I do think that's a story to watch. And quite frankly, if he isn't able to win one of those starting jobs, going into the season with a first-round draft pick being your number 6 guy, being your first guy off the bench potentially on the offensive line when you need somebody, that's not exactly a bad spot to be in either.
It's not. I've seen people say like, oh, what a disappointment or stuff like that. If the other 5 guys are just better and he still is a really good lineman, but you have him as your number 6, well, we know, Mike, you're going to need that 6th offensive lineman probably sooner rather than later. Like injuries are going to happen along the offensive line. You got 5 guys that have got unbelievable versatility along that line. And he's going to have a huge value to Green Bay one way or the other. We've also seen Green Bay not afraid to do rotations on the offensive line. A lot of teams are not willing to do that. Green Bay said, they could easily, have Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker do the left tackle swap like we've seen in the past with Yosh Nijman and Rasheed Walker. We could see it at right guard with Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan, like we saw with Sean Ryan and John Runyon Jr. in the past as well. So those are also possibilities, but he's going to play at some point this year. I think he's going to have a really sound season. I'm also interested, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this as well. If the Elton, injury situation does kind of continue, we saw a lot of Jacob Monk at, center in OTAs and mini camps. I'll be curious if that continues and if Monk continues to get that, or if they do kick Sean Ryan over, get him some of those reps and the idea of best 5 guys out there, and then just put Jordan Morgan at right guard and see if until Elton comes back, like maybe they just kind of work it that way. So there's a lot of moving pieces there, but I'm very interested. I'm right there with you to see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, and I think with regard to the center spot, if there is a period here, before Elton Jenkins is back, we may see both things happen. We may see Sean Ryan taking reps. We may see Jacob Monk taking reps, and they're going to work both guys. They're going to work multiple combinations and whatnot on the offensive line until it really comes down to decision time. And then you have to kind of pick what you're doing to move forward for the start of the regular season. So there's going to be a lot of news these first few days of training camp. But I think everybody has to keep in mind it's just the first few days of training camp. There's going to be family night. There's going to be some joint practices and the preseason games. There's a lot to sort out here over the next month or so, not just with regard to the 53, but then what is the lineup going to look like heading into week one. And this week is just the beginning.
I disagree. I will be making all my sweeping overreactions just based off of today's practice, and everything will be determined at the end of this 90 minutes or so today. But no, you're absolutely right. There's a long way to go. This is just the beginning, but it's still fun to obviously see all these guys back on the field. Of course, the big question everyone wants to know, Mike Spofford, 3 things. Is it going to be back at the end of each practice? You know, you, Larry, Wes, give one big takeaway at the end. I love listening to you guys every single day. Are we going to get 3 things at the end of practice today?
Yeah, it is on the rundown. We will be doing it right at the edge of the practice field as soon as practice is over, like we've done for I don't know how many years that segment has been going on now. But yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. It has definitely become a staple of training camp for us, and we will keep rolling.
What's the normal process for you of like when you know your 3 thing hits, like when your thing hits of like, has there been a moment where like the camera's about to go on and you're like, all right, need a thing, or usually did like middle of the practice, or you like, all right, I got my thing and maybe a backup thing in case Wes or Rock takes the other one?
Yeah, this is how it usually goes. So practice ends, we're walking over towards where the camera is set up. I will cross paths with Wes and I will say, okay, like, what do you want? Okay, you got that. I got this. We get in front of the camera, and then they're doing like the mic checks, and Larry's like, okay, what are you guys talking about? And I'll tell him what I got. Wes will tell him what he's got. And then we have no idea what Larry's going to talk about. But then Larry goes last, and we all sort of turn our heads and be entertained by the Rock with whatever it is that he has observed during the past 90 to 120 minutes. So that's literally the extent of, I guess, what you'd call the pre-production meeting when it comes to 3 things.
Love it. I absolutely love it. All right, a couple more before we get you out of here. I know I'm sure you want to get over and get prepped for Goody and Matt here momentarily, but a couple of quick things. One of the things I've been trying to ask people who have obviously been kind of in your position or covering this team for a while, there's always these training camp memories that you have of covering the team. You've been doing this now. How many years have you been doing this now, Mike? It's been a hot second.
Yeah, with Packers.com, this is actually my 20th training camp with the website. So yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
That's awesome. So 20 years, it spans quite a distance. What are maybe a couple things that have stood out to you that you've taken away? It could be a moment, could be a play, could be a player. I'll let you go in any direction you want.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, obviously, and after all these years, a lot of training camps run together. But I this is kind of crazy to talk about because he's probably a player that a lot of Packer fans don't even really remember. But I will never forget the year that I believe it was either right before or right after family night. So you're talking a week and a half to 2 weeks into training camp. A guy named Chris Banjo showed up as a late training camp signing. And he was thrown in there at safety. He's thrown in there on special teams. Nobody really thought much of it at the time. And lo and behold, the guy ended up making the team, despite the fact that he wasn't here all spring and he missed the first couple weeks of training camp. He makes the team and becomes, in effect, a special teams captain during the course of his time with the Packers. And then he went on to play a number of other years with other squads as well. That's just one of those things that a guy like Banjo, who I enjoyed him. He was always a great guy to talk to. I got a one-on-one interview with him one year for a Packers yearbook story. Really enjoyed the time that Chris was here. But I've always kept that in mind as one of those examples where if somebody gets signed after the start of training camp and walks out there on the practice field, don't just write him off. I mean, yeah, the odds are long. It's the chances aren't great that guy is going to make the team or even make the practice squad, but don't completely write him off, because every once in a while there'll be a Chris Banjo that walks out there on the practice field and then is suddenly going to be playing games in week 1 for the Green Bay Packers.
There's that linebacker a few years ago as well that made it also as a special teams guy. But the Banjo story is so cool. He played a decade in the league, is now the Jets special teams coordinator, just signed on to be their special teams coordinator this year. So, yeah, he made a name for himself just kind of out of nowhere, and it was a really cool story. So that's a great one, and I love just kind of bringing players like that up, because they're kind of the unsung heroes and kind of like some of the cooler stories of training camp. All right, last but not least, Mike Spofford, Packers.com. Before we get you out of here, you don't get many opportunities to talk Milwaukee Brewers baseball, but I know you are a huge Brewers fan. So they have obviously been unbelievable as of late. Tough 1-0 loss this past night, but how are you feeling about your Brew Crew?
Well, hey, how can you not feel good about where things are going? I mean, this has been quite the run. They've not only closed the gap on the Cubs, but obviously have caught up to the Cubs at this point. And it's last night was, you can't get upset when an 11-game winning streak ends, right? You know the streak is going to end at some point. Certainly frustrating to see one poorly placed high fastball by Nick Mears ends up costing you the winning streak there. But that being said, it's fun to watch these guys. It's a bunch of young guys that really believe in who they are and what they're doing and the way they play the game. And they play the game differently than the Cubs. They play the game differently than the Mets and the Dodgers. And they've shown that they can be competitive with all of those teams. And so it's fun. There's still a long way to go. Who knows what's going to happen here? But they're a fun bunch, and hopefully training camp doesn't keep me away too much from following the Brew Crew.
I'm sure you'll find some time in between, that's for sure. And they're certainly a team worth keeping an extra eye on. And I know for me, like even last night, I was trying to have the game on and get some work done. And they're just such a fun team to watch, that whether they're pitching or batting or on base or anything, it's just you don't want to take your eye off the game and do anything else. It's just like they're such an exciting team to watch. So I'm right there with you. I'm sure we'll both be trying to catch as much Brewers as we possibly can in between tweets and articles and podcasts and everything else about the Green Bay Packers. Mike, you do an unbelievable job. I cannot wait to read all of your work all throughout the course of training camp. Tell us all about where we can follow you and anything you want to plug on the way out.
Yeah, well, we've got all the coverage of training camp on Packers.com. We're going to have 5 Things articles every day. We're going to have the 3 Things videos that you talked about. Wes and I are doing Packers Unscripted. We just brought that show back yesterday, and we'll have 2 episodes a week of that. So whether it's written, whether it's video, whether it's podcast, we've got you covered on Packers.com. So be sure to come and check us out. And I'm at Mike Spofford on Twitter. I don't tweet as much as you do at practice, Andy, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anybody does. So, but no, we have a lot of fun out there, and we'll be keeping an eye on things as best we can.
The carpal tunnel will catch up with me eventually from the Twitter fingers going a little bit too wild. I'm excited to see you out there, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time this morning, and I'll see you at Goody's Presser in just over half an hour.
Yeah, sounds good. See you soon, Andy. Thanks for having me.